Manhattan in December was a study in contrasts, bitter cold wrapped in glittering lights, harsh reality dressed up in holiday cheer. I stood in the doorway of the Sinclair Gallery, champagne flute in hand, watching the city's elite pretend to understand the abstract sculptures on display. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm 35, a criminal defense attorney with a corner office and a reputation for winning impossible cases. I'd been invited to this gallery opening by a client whose son fancied himself an artist. Obligation, not interest, had brought me here. I was about to leave when I saw him. He stood in front of a massive canvas, all violent reds and blacks, chaos frozen in paint, completely still, completely absorbed. While everyone else circulated with their cocktails and their calculated conversations, this man stood alone, staring at the painting like it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. He was beautiful in an understated way. Mid-20s, maybe younger, with sandy blonde hair that fell across his forehead and a slim build wrapped in an expensive suit that somehow looked uncomfortable on him. But it was his face that held me, the way his expression shifted as he studied the painting, moving from pain to recognition to something that looked like grief. I don't know what made me approach him. I'd spent years perfecting the art of professional distance, of keeping people at arm's length. But something about the way he stood there, so lost in his own world, drew me forward. "Powerful piece," I said, coming to stand beside him. He startled, like he'd forgotten other people existed. When he turned to look at me, I was struck by his eyes, green, but not just green. The color of ocean water over sand, clear and deep and impossibly sad. "Sorry," he said, his voice soft, cultured, with the faint trace of a British accent. "I didn't hear you approach." "Didn't mean to interrupt, you seemed pretty absorbed." "It's called The Breaking," he said, turning back to the painting. "The artist painted it after her daughter died. She said she wanted to capture what it felt like when grief finally caught up to her, when she stopped being numb and started feeling everything at once." "That's heavy for a holiday party." "Heavy is honest," he replied. "Everything else here is just noise." I studied him more carefully. Up close, I could see the fine tremor in his hands, the way his jaw was clenched tight, the shadows under his eyes that expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. "I'm Daniel," I offered. "Ethan," he didn't offer a last name and I didn't ask. "So, Ethan, what brings you to this particular circle of hell?" That earned me a small smile, the first crack in his carefully maintained composure. "Family obligation, you." "Same, though I'm beginning to think we both could have found better ways to spend a Thursday night." "There are always better ways," Ethan said quietly, something dark flickering across his face. "The question is whether we're brave enough to choose them." Before I could respond, a voice cut through the gallery noise, loud, commanding, impossible to ignore. "Ethan, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." The man who approached us was everything Ethan wasn't: tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of aggressive confidence that comes from never being told no. He was older, maybe 45, with silver threading through his dark hair and a Rolex that probably cost more than my car. "Father," Ethan said, and I watched his entire body language change. The vulnerability that had been there moments ago disappeared behind a wall of perfect posture and practiced indifference. I was just admiring the collection. "Well, stop hiding in the corner. Marcus Whitmore is here. You remember Marcus? His firm just landed the Rothschild account. Come along." The man's eyes flicked to me, dismissive and cold. "Excuse us." "Of course," I said smoothly, even as every instinct screamed that something was wrong. Ethan's eyes met mine for just a second, an apology, a plea, something desperate and quickly hidden. Then he turned and followed his father into the crowd. I should have left it alone. Should have finished my champagne, made my excuses, and gone home to my empty penthouse. But I'd spent 15 years reading people, witnesses, jurors, defendants, and what I'd read in Ethan's eyes was fear. So instead of leaving, I watched. Ethan's father, whoever he was, kept a hand on his son's shoulder as they moved through the gallery, not affectionate, possessive, controlling, and Ethan moved like someone walking through a minefield, every step calculated, every smile forced. They stopped in front of a group of older men in expensive suits. Ethan shook hands, made polite conversation, played the role of dutiful son with practiced ease, but I could see the cost, could see the way his shoulders tensed, the way his hands trembled slightly when he thought no one was looking. 20 minutes later, I saw him slip away from the group and head toward the back of the gallery, toward the restrooms. I gave him a minute, then followed. The hallway leading to the restrooms was mercifully quiet, insulated from the gallery's noise by thick walls and expensive architecture. I found Ethan leaning against the wall beside the men's room door, his head tilted back, eyes closed, breathing in slow, measured counts. "You okay?" I asked. His eyes snapped open, and for a second I saw pure panic before the mask slammed back into place. "Fine," he said, but his voice shook. "Just needed a moment." "Ethan. Please," the word came out sharp, desperate. "Please just leave me alone." But even as he said it, his breathing was getting faster, shallower. His hands were shaking visibly now, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the gallery's climate control. I recognized the signs: panic attack. "Listen to me," I said, keeping my voice calm and low. "You're okay, you're safe. I need you to breathe with me, all right? In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. "I can't," his voice cracked. "I can't breathe." "Yes, you can. Look at me, Ethan, just at me." His eyes locked onto mine, wide with fear. "In," I counted, breathing deeply and slowly. 2, 3, 4, hold 2, 3, 4, out 2, 3, 4. He tried to follow, his breath hitching and uneven, but gradually, shakily, his breathing started to slow. "That's it," I encouraged. "You're doing great again. In 2, 3, 4. We stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, breathing together, until the panic receded and left Ethan trembling but coherent. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry, I." "Don't apologize. How often does this happen?" He looked away. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me." "Why?" The question was plaintive, confused. "You don't even know me." "No," I agreed, "but I'd like to." Ethan laughed, a broken sound. "Trust me, you really wouldn't. Let me be the judge of that." Before he could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Ethan's father appeared, his expression thunderous. "There you are." "Honestly, Ethan, disappearing in the middle of an important conversation, do you have any idea how that looks?" "I wasn't feeling well," Ethan said quietly. "I just needed a moment." "Well, you've had your moment. Marcus is waiting. Let's go." "Actually," I interjected, surprising myself, "Ethan was just telling me about his work in architecture, was it? I'd love to hear more about the Riverside project." I was making it up completely, but Ethan's father didn't need to know that. The older man's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "Daniel Reeves, criminal defense. I represent the Ashford family." I dropped the name deliberately. The Ashfords were old money, connected, powerful, exactly the kind of people men like Ethan's father wanted to impress. The calculation was immediate and transparent. "I see. Well, perhaps a brief conversation wouldn't hurt. 5 minutes, Ethan, then you're needed back in the main gallery." He walked away, leaving us alone again. "You didn't have to do that," Ethan said. "I know, but your father's an asshole and you looked like you needed a rescue." "That obvious?" "Only to someone who's paying attention." I pulled out my phone. "Give me your number." "What?" "Your number, unless you don't want to continue this conversation somewhere that isn't a hallway outside a restroom at a pretentious gallery opening." Ethan stared at me like I'd suggested something impossible. "You're serious?" "Completely. Look, I don't know what's going on with you and your father. I don't know why you're having panic attacks at art galleries, but I do know that nobody should have to face whatever you're facing alone." I held out my phone. "So, number." He hesitated for so long I thought he'd refuse. Then, with shaking hands, he took my phone and typed in his number. "I can't promise I'll call," he said, handing it back. "I can't promise I won't call you first," I countered. The smile he gave me was small, sad, and heartbreakingly genuine. "Thank you, Daniel." "For what?" "For seeing me." Before I could ask what he meant, he walked away, back toward the gallery and his father and the life that was clearly suffocating him. I left shortly after, but I couldn't stop thinking about him, about those ocean green eyes filled with pain, about the way he'd looked at that painting like he understood breaking from the inside. At 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, I did something I'd never done before. I used my firm's resources to look him up. Ethan Ashford Sinclair, 24 years old, only son of Robert Sinclair, CEO of Sinclair Holdings, one of the largest private equity firms in the country, graduate of Yale, currently working at his father's company. The photos I found showed the same young man I'd met but different, stiffer, more controlled, always standing slightly behind his father, always impeccably dressed, always wearing that same practiced smile that never reached his eyes. There were other photos too, Ethan at charity galas, Ethan at business conferences, and in several recent photos Ethan standing next to a woman tall, elegant with dark hair and a smile as practiced as his. The captions identified her as Victoria Hawthorne, daughter of Senator Hawthorne, Ethan's fiancée. I closed my laptop, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Of course he was engaged. Of course he had a picture-perfect life mapped out by his controlling father. Of course I'd been stupid enough to read more into a brief conversation than was actually there. I should have deleted his number, should have chalked the whole evening up to a moment of weakness and moved on. Instead, at 2:37 a.m. I sent him a text. "Hope you survived the rest of the evening, Daniel." I didn't expect a response, which is why I was surprised when my phone buzzed 3 minutes later. "Barely, thank you again for earlier, I meant what I said, you didn't have to help me." "I know, but I wanted to, can I ask you something?" A long pause, then, "You can ask, I can't promise I'll answer." "Fair enough, are you okay? And I don't mean right now in this moment, I mean in general, are you okay?" The response took longer this time. When it came, it was just 2 words. "I don't know." I stared at those words for a long time, trying to decide what to say, how to offer help to someone who clearly needed it but might not be able to accept it. Finally, I typed, "If you ever want to talk about anything or nothing, I'm here, no judgment, no expectations, just here." "Why are you being so kind to me?" "Because you look like someone who hasn't been offered kindness in a long time, and everyone deserves that." Another long pause, then, "I saw you watching me at the gallery before you approached, what did you see?" I considered lying, considered giving some safe, meaningless answer, but something told me Ethan had enough lies in his life. "I saw someone drowning in plain sight, someone performing instead of living, someone who looked at a painting about breaking and understood it too well." "You see too much." "Occupational hazard, I'm a lawyer, reading people is what I do." "And what else do you see when you look at me?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This was dangerous territory. He was engaged. He had a life, obligations, a future already written. I should have backed off. Instead, I wrote, "Someone worth knowing, someone worth saving, someone who deserves better than whatever situation they're trapped in." The response came immediately, "I have to go, good night, Daniel." I thought that was the end of it, that I'd pushed too hard, seen too much, said too much. But at 3:15 a.m. my phone rang. "Hello. I need to see you." Ethan's voice was rough, urgent. "Please, I can't be alone right now." I was already getting dressed. "Where are you?" "Central Park, the Bow Bridge." "It's 3 in the morning and below freezing, Ethan." "Please." The desperation in his voice cut through any argument I might have made. "Please, Daniel, I need someone to see me, really see me, not the version my father wants, not the version Victoria expects, just me. I'm on my way, stay on the phone with me." "Okay." I grabbed my coat and headed out, keeping my phone pressed to my ear. "Talk to me about anything. What's your favorite color?" "What?" "Your favorite color, it's a simple question." "Blue," he said after a moment. "Ocean blue, the color the water turns at sunrise when the light hits it just right." "Favorite food?" "This is ridiculous." "Humor me, I'm trying to distract you while I navigate Manhattan traffic at 3 in the morning." A small laugh. "My mother used to make this pasta, homemade pappardelle with wild mushrooms. She died when I was 12, I haven't had it since." "I'm sorry." "Don't be, it was a long time ago." But his voice caught on the words, betraying the lie. I kept him talking, meaningless questions, simple answers, until I reached the park. I found him standing on the bridge exactly where he said he'd be, illuminated by a single street lamp, looking lost and small and unbearably alone. "Ethan," I called softly. He turned, and the relief that flooded his face when he saw me was almost painful to witness. He started walking toward me, but his legs gave out halfway. I caught him before he hit the ground, his body collapsing into my arms like a puppet with cut strings. "Please don't let go," he whispered against my chest, his hands fisting in my coat. "Please, Daniel, don't let go." "I've got you," I said, holding him tighter. "I'm not letting go." We stood like that on the bridge, Ethan trembling in my arms while I held him together, until his breathing steadied and he could stand on his own. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling back but not quite letting go. "I'm such a mess, you must think I'm completely insane." "I think you're in pain," I corrected gently. "There's a difference. Come on, let's get you somewhere warm." I took him to my apartment, a decision that probably qualified as insane, but I wasn't about to leave him alone in this state. He sat on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, while I made tea neither of us would drink. "You want to tell me what happened?" I asked, sitting down beside him. "I had dinner with my father and Victoria," he said, staring at nothing, "to discuss wedding plans, the venue, the guest list, the timeline. Victoria wants a June wedding. My father thinks spring would be better for business optics. Nobody asked what I wanted." "What do you want?" "I want to not exist," he said flatly. "I want to disappear. I want to wake up and be someone else somewhere else living a completely different life." "Ethan, do you know what it's like to be a ghost in your own life?" He turned to look at me, tears streaming down his face. "To go through every day playing a role, saying the right things, being the right person until you can't remember who you actually are underneath all the performance." "Yes," I said quietly, "I do." He blinked, surprised. "You?" "I spent 10 years married to a woman I didn't love, living a life I didn't want because I was too afraid to admit I was gay, too afraid of what my family would say, what my colleagues would think, what it would mean for my career." I met his eyes. "So yes, Ethan, I know exactly what it's like to be a ghost." "When did you stop being a ghost?" "When my wife found me kissing someone else, when the secret I'd been keeping exploded and destroyed everything, when I finally had no choice but to face the truth." "And was it worth it, the explosion, the destruction?" "Every single day," I said without hesitation. "Because now when I look in the mirror I see myself, not some character I'm playing, not some version of me designed to make other people comfortable, just me, and that's worth more than any perfect life I was pretending to have." Ethan was silent for a long time. Then, "I'm supposed to marry Victoria in 6 months. Do you love her?" "I care about her. She's kind, intelligent, ambitious. Everything my father wants in a daughter-in-law." "That's not what I asked." "No," he admitted, "I don't love her, not the way I should, not the way she deserves." "Does she know?" "She knows I'm not demonstrative. She thinks I'm just reserved, private. She doesn't know that when she kisses me I feel nothing, that when she talks about our future I want to run, that every time I think about our wedding I can't breathe." "Ethan, you can't marry someone you don't love. That's not fair to either of you." "You don't understand," he said, his voice breaking. "My father has made it very clear what happens if I don't marry Victoria. I lose everything, my job, my trust fund, my family. He'll disown me completely. I'll have nothing." "You'll have yourself," I said firmly. "You'll have your freedom. You'll have the chance to build a life that's actually yours." "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple, it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do, but Ethan, the alternative is spending the rest of your life suffocating. Is that really living?" He turned to look at me, and in his eyes I saw the moment something shifted. The moment he moved from fear to recognition to something that looked like hope. "I think I'm gay," he whispered. "No, I know I am. I've known since I was 16, but I've spent 8 years pretending I'm not. 8 years dating women I didn't want, making plans for a future that makes me want to die, and I don't know if I can keep doing it." "Then don't," I said simply. "It's not that easy." "It never is, but Ethan, you called me at 3 in the morning and begged me not to let go. What do you think you were really asking for?" He stared at me, tears streaming down his face. "Help, I was asking for help." "Then let me help you, let me be here while you figure out what comes next. You don't have to face this alone." "Why?" The question was plaintive, desperate. "Why would you do that for me? You barely know me." "Because when I look at you, I see who I used to be, scared and suffocating and convinced I didn't have a choice. And I want to be for you what no one was for me, someone who says it's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to want more than the life you've been handed. Ethan made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Then he was moving, closing the distance between us, his hands coming up to cup my face. I'm going to kiss you, he whispered, and if you don't want me to, you need to stop me now. I didn't stop him. The kiss was desperate, searching like he was trying to prove something to himself. His lips were soft and urgent against mine, his hands trembling where they held my face. I kissed him back gently, carefully, trying to pour 8 years of understanding into the touch. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. I've never, Ethan started, then stopped. I've kissed men before, in college, in dark corners where no one could see, but I've never. This is the first time it's felt real, like maybe I'm allowed to want this. You are allowed, I said firmly. You're allowed to want whatever, whoever makes you happy. What if that's you? The question was barely audible. What if I want you and this and the possibility of something real? My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Then we take it one day at a time, we figure it out together, but Ethan, you have to make some decisions first. About Victoria, about your father, about what kind of life you actually want. I know, he rested his forehead against mine. I know, and I will. Can I stay here tonight? I don't want to go back to my apartment. I don't want to be alone. You can stay as long as you need. We ended up on my couch, Ethan curled against my chest, my arms wrapped around him. At some point he fell asleep, his face peaceful in a way I suspected it rarely was when he was awake. I stayed awake holding him, thinking about the impossible situation we'd stumbled into, the complications, the risks, the fact that he was engaged to someone else, trapped in a life designed by his father, barely holding himself together. The smart thing would have been to back away, to offer support as a friend but nothing more, to protect myself from the inevitable pain of caring about someone who might not be able to choose me. But as I looked down at Ethan sleeping in my arms, his fingers still clutching my shirt like he was afraid I'd disappear, I knew it was already too late for smart. I was already in too deep. And whatever came next, whatever explosions and destruction and consequences followed, I knew I wouldn't let him face it alone. Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan and I fell into a strange, secret rhythm. He'd text me in the middle of the day, brief messages between meetings, stolen moments of honesty in a life built on performance. We'd meet for coffee, for walks through the city, for late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. And slowly, piece by piece, I watched him start to come alive. The Ethan I got to know was nothing like the ghost I'd met at the gallery. He was funny, sharp, surprisingly cynical. He loved old movies and terrible puns. He could talk for hours about architecture, the real kind, not whatever corporate work his father forced him to do. He dreamed of designing sustainable housing, of creating spaces that actually helped people instead of just making money. I wanted to go to graduate school, he told me one night, lying on my couch with his head in my lap while I ran my fingers through his hair. Study environmental design. My mother always said I had an artist's soul, but when she died, my father made it very clear that art was a hobby, not a career. Business was what mattered, legacy was what mattered. It's not too late, I said. You're 24, your life isn't over. It feels like it is sometimes, like I made all my important choices at 18 and now I'm just living with the consequences. So make different choices. He looked up at me, his green eyes impossibly sad. I'm trying, being here with you, this is me trying. But he was still going home to his apartment every night, still having dinners with Victoria and her family, still showing up at his father's office and playing the dutiful son. You have to tell them, I said one night when he showed up at my door shaking after another family dinner. Victoria deserves to know the truth. Your father deserves to know you're not going to live the life he planned. I know, Ethan said. I know, I need more time. Time for what? To be sure, to be ready, to figure out how to do this without destroying everything. Ethan, there's no way to do this that doesn't hurt, that doesn't have consequences, but the longer you wait, the worse it's going to be. I know, his voice rose sharp with frustration. God, Daniel, I know, but you're asking me to blow up my entire life, to lose my family, my job, everything I've ever known, and I want to be brave enough to do it, but I'm terrified. I'm not asking you to be fearless, I said gently. I'm asking you to be honest with them, with yourself, with me. I am being honest with you. Are you? Because you're still going home to Victoria every night, still planning a wedding you have no intention of going through with, still living in two worlds and pretending you can keep them separate forever. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. We fought more after that, about timelines and expectations and what we actually were to each other, because we'd never defined it, never put words to the thing growing between us, something deeper than friendship, more desperate than casual, but existing in the shadows of Ethan's other life. Then 3 weeks after we met, everything changed. I was in court when my phone started blowing up. Text after text from a number I didn't recognize, voicemails, missed calls. When I finally checked during a recess, my blood ran cold. The messages were all links to the same article. Sinclair heir caught in secret affair, engagement to senator's daughter in question. There were photos, grainy, clearly taken with a long-range lens but unmistakable. Ethan and me having coffee, walking through Central Park. One particularly damning image of us standing close, my hand on his face in what could only be interpreted as intimacy. I called Ethan immediately. It went straight to voicemail. I left court early, drove straight to his apartment. The doorman wouldn't let me up. Mr. Sinclair left strict instructions that he's not receiving visitors, he said apologetically. This is an emergency, please just tell him Daniel is here. I'm sorry, sir, my instructions were very clear. I tried calling again and again, all my calls went to voicemail, my texts went unanswered. For 6 hours I heard nothing. 6 hours of spiraling panic, imagining every worst-case scenario. Ethan confronting his father, Victoria learning the truth, Ethan alone and overwhelmed and unable to cope. Finally, at 11 p.m., there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Ethan standing in the hallway, soaked from the rain I hadn't noticed starting. His eyes were red and swollen, his face blotchy from crying. He looked like someone who'd had their world torn apart. Ethan, I started, but he walked past me into the apartment, his movements mechanical. They know, he said, his voice completely flat. Everyone knows, the photos are everywhere, my father saw them, Victoria saw them. By tomorrow morning, every business associate, every family friend, every person I've ever known will have seen them. I'm so sorry. Victoria called off the engagement, he laughed, a broken sound. She was actually relieved. Said she'd suspected for months that my heart wasn't in it but didn't want to believe it. She wished me well. Can you imagine? I destroyed her publicly, humiliated her family, and she wished me well. That's because she's a good person who recognized she deserved better than a marriage built on lies. My father wasn't as understanding. Ethan's voice cracked. He said the things he said, that I was a disgrace, an embarrassment, that I'd destroyed years of carefully built relationships and family reputation for what? For some sordid affair with a man. He said if I walked out that door, if I chose you, I was no longer his son. Ethan. So I left, the words came out barely above a whisper. I left Daniel, I chose myself just like you said I should, and now I have nothing, no family, no job, no future, just nothing. He swayed where he stood, and I realized he was on the verge of collapse, not just physically but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Whatever had been holding him together had finally shattered completely. I crossed to him and pulled him into my arms. He collapsed against me, his full weight pressing into my chest as his knees gave out. Please don't let go, he whispered, the same words he'd said that first night on the bridge. Please, Daniel, don't let go. Never, I promised, holding him tighter. I'm not going anywhere, I've got you. He broke then, completely and utterly, sobbing against my shoulder while I held him, while years of repression and pain and fear came pouring out in great, wrenching gasps. I held him through all of it, one hand in his hair, the other rubbing circles on his back, murmuring reassurances I wasn't sure were true. When the storm finally passed, I guided him to the bedroom. He was shaking with exhaustion, barely able to stand. Stay with me, he whispered as I helped him into bed. Please, I can't be alone. I'm not leaving, I promised, climbing in beside him and pulling him against my chest. I'm right here. I'm sorry, he murmured, already half asleep. I'm sorry for dragging you into this mess, for the photos, for the scandal, for... Stop apologizing, I interrupted gently. You didn't do anything wrong, you just stopped pretending. There's no shame in that. Everyone hates me. Everyone who matters will understand, and the ones who don't, they weren't worth having in your life anyway. He was quiet for a long moment, then Daniel. Yes. That night on the bridge when I called you, I was going to jump. My heart stopped. What? I'd been standing there for an hour trying to work up the courage, thinking about how much easier it would be to just stop pretending, stop fighting, stop existing, and then I called you instead. His voice was barely audible. You saved my life that night, you've been saving it ever since. I had to take several deep breaths before I could speak. You saved yourself, Ethan, I just gave you a reason to choose to keep fighting. Thank you, he whispered, for seeing me, for not running, his voice broke, for loving me enough to let me be broken. I pressed a kiss to his forehead. You're not broken, you're healing, there's a difference. He fell asleep in my arms, his breathing eventually evening out into the deep rhythm of exhaustion. But I stayed awake thinking about what he'd said, about how close I'd come to never meeting him, about how many people suffered in silence because they didn't think they had a choice. And I made a decision. If Ethan had chosen himself, had walked away from everything he'd ever known for the possibility of something real, then I owed him the same courage. I would help him build a new life, a real life, a life where he didn't have to hide or pretend or apologize for existing. Whatever it took. The fallout was worse than either of us expected. The photos triggered a media-feeding frenzy. Tabloids ran stories about the Sinclair heirs' scandalous double life. Conservative pundits used Ethan as an example of moral decay in wealthy families. Senator Hawthorne released a statement expressing disappointment and emphasizing that the engagement had been terminated. Robert Sinclair released his own statement. My son has chosen a path incompatible with our family values and business interests. Effective immediately, he is no longer affiliated with Sinclair Holdings or the Sinclair family. Ethan read it on his phone one morning, his face completely blank. Well, he said, his voice hollow, that's that. I'm sorry, I said, knowing the words were inadequate. Don't be, he gave me exactly what I expected, at least now there's no ambiguity. He set down his phone. I need to find a job, an apartment, figure out how to exist in the world as just Ethan, not Ethan Sinclair, just me. You can stay here as long as you need to. I can't keep living on your couch, Daniel. Then move into the bedroom with me officially. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. You're serious? Completely. Ethan, we've been dancing around what this is for weeks. I don't want to dance anymore, I want you here, I want to wake up next to you and fall asleep holding you and figure out this mess together. So yes, move in with me, not as a guest, as my partner. Your partner, he repeated, testing the words. I like how that sounds. So is that a yes? It's a yes, Ethan said and kissed me. The next weeks were hard but hopeful. Ethan started seeing a therapist, working through years of trauma and repression. He reached out to old friends from college, the ones who'd known him before his father's expectations reshaped him. Some embraced him, others couldn't handle the scandal. He applied for jobs in architecture, surprised to find that his Yale degree and natural talent mattered more than his last name. Within a month, he'd accepted a position at a small firm specializing in sustainable design, exactly what he'd always wanted to do. It pays a fraction of what I made at my father's company, he told me one evening, his eyes bright with excitement. But Daniel, they actually care about the work, about making a difference, not just profit margins. That's incredible, I said, pulling him into my arms. I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of me too, he admitted. For the first time in my life, I'm doing something because I want to, not because someone else expects it. We had setbacks, days when Ethan would spiral, convinced he'd made a terrible mistake, nights when he'd wake up from nightmares about his father's rejection, moments when the weight of everything he'd lost felt crushing. But we worked through it together. 6 months after the scandal broke, Ethan was different, lighter. The shadows that had lived in his eyes were fading, replaced by something that looked like peace. I saw my father today, he told me one evening, by accident at a restaurant downtown. My hand tightened on his. What happened? He looked right through me like I didn't exist, like I was a stranger. Ethan's voice was steady, stronger than I'd heard it in months. And you know what? It hurt, but it didn't destroy me because I realized something. What? He can take away my name, my money, my place in his world, but he can't take away who I actually am. And who I am, the real me, the one I've spent my whole life hiding, that person is finally free. I love you, I said, the words I'd been holding back for months finally breaking free. God, Ethan, I love you so much. I love you too, he said, smiling through tears. You gave me the courage to choose myself, to believe I deserved better than the life I was living. You saved me, Daniel. We saved each other, I corrected. You reminded me what it means to be brave, to fight for what matters even when it costs everything. That night, for the first time since everything had fallen apart, we made love. Not desperate or urgent, but slow and reverent, learning each other's bodies the way we'd learned each other's souls, with patience and care and overwhelming tenderness. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Ethan traced patterns on my chest. I used to think happiness was something other people got to have, he said quietly. Something I'd have to earn by being perfect, by meeting every expectation, by never disappointing anyone, but now I know better. What do you know? That happiness isn't something you earn, it's something you choose. Every single day you choose whether to live authentically or keep pretending, and I choose this, I choose you, I choose us. Every day, I asked, smiling. Every day, he confirmed, for as long as you'll have me. Then I guess you're stuck with me forever. Forever sounds perfect. The gallery opening was packed. I stood in the corner, champagne in hand, watching Ethan work the room. He moved with easy confidence now, nothing like the terrified ghost I'd met 2 years ago. His work, a series of designs for affordable, sustainable housing, covered the walls, and the crowd was genuinely impressed. Your partner's incredibly talented, a woman beside me commented. These designs could change the industry. He is, I agreed, unable to keep the pride out of my voice, and they will. Ethan caught my eye from across the room and smiled, the real smile, the one that lit up his entire face. He excused himself from his conversation and made his way over to me. Having fun, he asked, slipping his hand into mine without hesitation. Watching you in your element, always. I still can't believe this is real sometimes, that this is my life now. Believe it, I said, squeezing his hand. You built this, you earned it. We built it, he corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to. A young man approached us, probably early 20s, with the same kind of desperate, hidden pain in his eyes that Ethan used to carry. Mr. Ashford Brennan, he said tentatively. Ethan had legally changed his name, dropping Sinclair and adding mine. I just wanted to say, your story, what you went through, it helped me. I've been struggling with coming out to my family, and seeing what you survived, how you rebuilt your life, it gave me courage. Ethan's expression softened. What's your name? Marcus. Marcus, can I tell you something? Walking away from my old life was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the best decision I've ever made. Because now when I look in the mirror, I see myself, the real me, and that's worth more than any approval, any inheritance, any perfect life built on lies. What if my family rejects me? Then they're making a terrible mistake, Ethan said gently. But Marcus, you can't live your life based on other people's limitations. You deserve to be happy, to be yourself, to love who you love without shame or fear. The young man's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, really thank you. After he walked away, I pulled Ethan closer. You know you're going to be his hero now, right? The person who showed him it's possible to survive. Good, Ethan said. Someone was that person for me, I'm just paying it forward. Who was your person? He looked at me, those ocean green eyes clear and bright and filled with love. You, Daniel, from the moment you saw me breaking down at that first gallery and didn't look away, you've been my person ever since. And you're mine, I said, pressing a kiss to his temple, forever. Forever, he agreed, leaning into the embrace. We stood there together, surrounded by the evidence of the life Ethan had built from the ashes of the one he'd destroyed. A life based on truth instead of performance, on love instead of obligation, on choice instead of expectation. It hadn't been easy. The path from that desperate night on the bridge to this moment of triumph had been filled with pain and loss and struggle. But looking at Ethan now, confident, happy, whole, I knew every hardship had been worth it. Because he'd collapsed in my arms that night whispering, "Please don't let go," and I hadn't. I'd held on through the breaking and the rebuilding and everything in between. And I'd never let go. Not then. Not ever.